Good morning, everyone. Look at that face. How could you not believe that face? Here is Dr. Jacobs, and he's a conservative supporting kind of guy, but he says, caption contest. The memes always make me laugh. Here's 222 minutes, and a parody of 20. This hour has 22 minutes. And he says, the opposite of a nothing burger is a keel burger. I thought that was great. A keel burger with everything on it. All of it. Here's a comparison between our current prime minister and the Burger King. I think it's pretty close. He could do some spokesman work for that. You know, easy. Here's an interesting. I didn't look up the corresponding links for this, so this is a screenshot, and it's interesting. However, it says at least 180 workers were paid to manipulate Google's search algorithm to promote positive stories on Wii and the Keelburgers. Also served to bury Canadaland reporting a report connecting Wii to 3 companies known to use child and slave labor in their supply chains. So the way you do that is you target the same keywords that people would be. So like if you're looking up Wii Keelburger controversy, right? You write articles debunking that with those keywords in it, and then you try and get them to rank in Google, right? Through on-page and off-page SEO. And it works. It works because it hides the true information from people who aren't aware that it's not necessarily Google. Like when people are gaming SEO, Google is an algorithm that gets updated regularly, but the way to game it is to confirm or to show Google that a lot of people think that what this page says it is legitimate, is what it is, right? And the way you do that is high-ranking websites pointing to your website, or lots of social media pointing to your website, or basically it looks at links, right? And how valuable those links are, and those links bestow value to the pages that they point to. And So say the true Canadaland article has 10 pages linking to it because 10 news articles said, yeah, this is valuable, you should link to it, right? And then an article that is done by a nefarious third party, who knows who, it has 125 high class links pointing to it. Which one's going to rank higher in Google, right? So it's not necessarily Google saying, I'm going to pick and choose these articles. It's done in a whole bunch of different ways. So being aware of that, it's not just, if you mandate to Google, you should do X, Y, Z, there are ways around that, right? Like it's not an easy problem to fix because there are many people who can manipulate data outside of Google using their algorithm, playing by the rules, right? That's what a good SEO person does. Anyway, here is Trudeau walking with his earpiece into, I don't actually know which building he's walking into, but there was a whole bunch of reporters. Everybody got upset that none of the reporters asked him any questions. He got out looking like he was ready to answer questions, earpiece, but nobody bothered him. He just walked out of the car and right into the building. No problem, sir. Have a good one. Hope to see you in the hearing. Bye. Good luck. Says CBC, right? Ezra Levent called them cowards. And anyway, here's Dr. Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs says, fluently bilingual, whereas an earpiece to a committee hearing seems legit. Please post a picture or GIF from who he could be speaking into Trudeau's ear, or a gift from who could be speaking into Trudeau's ear. So, I mean, I'm not so interested in the GIF contest. It's just interesting that he's got the earpiece on. I was expecting this to take place in the House of Commons. I was surprised to see him in by video. That was weird. I haven't watched all of Telford's testimony yet. I may get to that for tomorrow. Yesterday I said, the main game here, whoever's been advising him has told him, don't get yourself in more trouble than you're already in. Try and explain. So basically this was an hour explainer video. And, that was the other fun thing. He was supposed to be there for 3 hours. There's a tweet about this, but he was only there for 1. I'll get there in just a minute. Kean says Trudeau is under oath and has already perjured himself. He said Craig Kielburger is not a friend. In a 2015 interview to the Ottawa Citizen, Craig said the exact opposite, someone he had known for already a decade. So it's interesting. It's interesting how, the truth is dependent on what the year is, what the context is, right? What do you mean, friend, exactly? What do you mean by friend? Here's Brian Lilly. He says, so the PM, Justin Trudeau, will still appear for just 1 hour, not the 3 requested by the committee. Meanwhile, at Telford will appear for 2 hours. And this is an adjustment to the hearing. And Trudeau ended up staying for an hour and a half. So here's kind of an overview, and then we're going to look at some specific situations. We've got Poilievre and Charlie Angus exchanges to look like. But here's CBC's article about this. Here, the interesting part about this is they give the Prime Minister all of this space. This is all what the Prime Minister said. No pushback. Just this is what the Prime Minister explained. This was designed to do no more harm, do no more damage to Trudeau, give him a chance to explain. And I think there's an opinion piece here that I'm going to read, and I think Gurney gets it right. He basically says, if you wanted to see a prime minister who had really good intentions and just got caught up in making a mistake, that's what you saw. And if you wanted to see a prime minister who was, drunk with power and giving his friends $1 billion giveaways, you could see that too, right? And I think that that's the hallmark of this prime minister. I think that the reason he's so divisive and so slippery is because he's convinced a lot of people that he really does mean well. He really is as genuine as this persona that he's putting out there, right? And I don't know. I don't trust necessarily that's exactly what we're getting with Trudeau. You can make up your own mind. I can make up my own mind at the voting booth, right? But I think that there's a large portion of Canadians who look at our options and say he's better than the rest. And how do you even make the argument that this illustrates that he's not, right? And because there are people who are going to look at this and walk away from this saying Pierre Poilievre was a bully. It's so wild. Okay, so Brian Lilly, he's already an hour. Okay, we'll read this. So here is, all of this is Trudeau. Starting through here, on May 21st, public servants said they had done their due diligence and they were confident in recommending We Charity as the administrator. So this is going through kind of why they're here and Trudeau's recollection of the date. He added some pushback. He said that the cabinet meeting on the May 8th, they wanted to bring the We Charity stuff up, and he said, no, we got to push it back because it's got to get done right. But the more he talks about that, the more he should have realized, or other people, smarter people than me, are saying the more he says, I knew that this was a problem, I knew that this was going to be questioned, and I knew I was going to have to, defend this, and that's why I pushed back on it. The more he talks about that, the more he makes the case or the more the non-recusal at the final stage looks unlikely. Like if you were this worried about the perception, etc., why not recuse yourself, right? It just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, if you watched it, if you didn't, here's kind of what happened. Okay, quote, the proposal mattered to me, and instead of encouraging it along and as some people say, because it was somehow connected to my family, I actually slowed it down. I pushed back on it to try and make sure that everything was done exactly right, he said, because I knew there would be questions asked because of the links to my family. But in no way was this benefiting my mother or my brother to be creating a grant program for students to volunteer in their communities right across the country. Trudeau also said he does not know the details of his family members' private business interests or how much money they might have received in expenses from We Charity. Quote, my mother and my brother are professionals in their own right who have engagements and have for many, many years with many different organizations across the country, and I don't have the details of their work experiences or expenses, Trudeau said. Under questioning by Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre, Trudeau said that his wife Sophie works for free as a mental health advocate and that the expenses she's collected from We Charity for her volunteer work have been cleared by the Ethics Commissioner's office. I scroll down a little bit. Quote, we got approval from the Ethics Commissioner that she could volunteer with this organization and have expenses related to the volunteerism reimbursed. Poilievre pressed Trudeau for details of the financial relationship his family had with We Charity. The Prime Minister said that, according to the Conflict of Interest Act, family members are defined solely as spouses and dependents. I scroll down. This is talking more about the social service recommending We. In fact, they said if we wanted this program to happen, it could only be with We Charity, Trudeau added. The choice was not between providers, it was between going ahead with We Charity to deliver the program or not going ahead with the program at all. And I think that they are still going ahead with the program despite We Charity's not being in it. Who knows? Anyway, back to this. I scroll down. Opposition MPs pushed to have Justin Trudeau remain in the hot seat for 3 hours, but he only extended his time at committee by another 30 minutes. After Trudeau's appearance, his chief of staff, Katie Telford, took the chair to answer questions about her role in the now defunct deal with We Charity. I've watched some of Telford, but I haven't watched enough of it to give you a really good feel for it. So I would feel dishonest giving you my opinion on Telford stuff. So I haven't watched it yet. I apologize. I just didn't have the time. I had to get a tire repaired. I ran over a nail. Annoying. Anyway, because I'd spend some time watching it in the morning. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Here's Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. Here's the situation. The chair, and Poilievre is the vice chair of this committee. So the chair's power has gone out, and the chair's not in the meeting. And these two have kind of been getting heated. And so nobody's intervening to stop this, because Poilievre is basically saying, like, answer the question, I'm looking for a dollar figure. And this is where Trudeau's saying he doesn't know the details of the monetary amount given to his family, his mother and his brother. And who, according to Trudeau, according to whatever, according to the Conflict of Interest Act, I believe that he's citing, they're not spouses and they're not dependents, so they're not included in the family definition as per the Conflict of Interest Act. I think that's the argument he's making. So, I mean, maybe he's got a point, right? And in the eyes of the law, maybe he's got a point. So here's the exchange.
Across the country,
Mr. Prime Minister, you are being asked a direct question at a parliamentary committee.
To support her because she does her own work, and I'm proud
Point of order.
of the work
Point of order.
But I do not feel that it is my responsibility to peer into the work my mother is doing, because I have
point of order to suspend.
She's doing.
Point of order to suspend.
I've come to learn that the chairperson's power has gone out and is no longer part of this meeting. May I propose that we?
It's okay. We can keep. Prime Minister and I can continue talking.
No.
I suspected that might be a problem. It's very convenient timing for the lights to go out.
Look, I got a message to the effect that his power has gone out. I have no reason to distrust him.
I hope you don't pull the fire alarm now.
Yeah, well, look, there's no intent in my own private home here in the middle of a pandemic. I don't have a fire alarm.
Mr. Fraser,
I propose
the general process is that the vice chair assumes the chairing of the meeting. So we'll continue.
And that would be me. So we'll continue the meeting. And I now give the floor to the member for Carleton. Mr. Prime Minister, you have. I'm going to ask you one last time. How much did your family get from this organization? How much?
Have you read the Conflict of Interest Act?
Okay, and at that point, the chair does come back, and I've let this play a long time, but link is in the description. Fundamentally, I'm not saying that Prime Minister Trudeau has a point that he's not guilty of being in a conflict of interest. I think that he's clearly in a conflict of interest, and that he should have recused himself, and he should not have given $1 billion contract to We. It was improper, totally and completely. I'm just saying, for the ethics part, just the ethics committee violation, looking at from that angle, potentially he's got a point on that. Okay, I wanted to make it really clear. It doesn't excuse the conflict of interest, because the conflict of interest says anybody benefiting, right, and goes through listing further wider out than just familial benefits, any associates, any friends, etc. So with regards to the law, I think that he's and with regards to recusal. But if you're looking at the ethics part of it, and I haven't looked at the Conflict of Interest Act to verify this argument. So, but that's the argument that Trudeau's making here. Okay. So moving on. Here is Charlie Angus. Oh wait, no, this is. Oh, I was going to play this clip here.
Across the country.
Mr.
Yeah. But here's Charlie Angus, and I'll play it on the YouTube one here. He says, I asked Justin Trudeau about asking university students with massive debts to work for less than minimum wage. He said I was attacking the spirit of volunteerism. Students don't have $41,000 to write a check when they're in trouble. He doesn't get it. Here's Charlie Angus asking Justin Trudeau and saying clearly, this is a conflict of interest. You're in a conflict of interest. You can't do this. Here we go.
We're not talking about perceptions. We're talking about breaches of the law. In your due diligence, why did you not bother to talk to the Conflict of Interest Commissioner? It is so obvious, Mr. Trudeau, that these conflicts were there. Why did you think it didn't apply to you?
Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. Angus, the public service came forward with a recommendation to Cabinet to move forward either with this specific third-party provider that was We Charity, or else not move forward with the program at all. That was the binary choice we proposed. I did not influence the public service to choose this organization. And indeed, when the public service came forward with this organization, I said, you know what? Let's put the brakes on it. Let's make sure that it's done absolutely everything right, because there are going to be questions because of the connections with my family on this. Yes, in hindsight, I should have recused myself, and perhaps that the program would be delivering for students right across the country right now. But I did not. Instead, I put the brakes on it and said, let's make sure that it is doing things the right way so that we don't have any communications or public problems.
Back to Mr.
But the question was, why didn't you talk to the ethics commissioner? Why didn't you find out about this, etc.? And this is the good intention thing that I'm talking about. If you can convince enough people that you meant well, I mean, you can have 3 ethics violations because you just really mean well, right? Here's Don Martin. He says, in a strange twist, Trudeau ignores his own red flags on the We scandal. I knew that it would look bad. I knew people would have questions. I didn't recuse myself because, I knew it looked awful. I just stayed doing it. Here's Matt Gurney. It's hard to imagine that any minds were changed by Trudeau's testimony. I tend to agree. I think that he didn't really change anybody's mind. I think that fundamentally people who thought that there was wrong done, regardless of exactly what that wrong thing was, still think that. And people who think that he had good intentions, so, he didn't mean to do that thing wrong. Forgivable, I think, is what people will think. And I don't think it's forgivable. I think this whole thing should bring down the government. But look at the state of our government. We've got the NDP. Jagmeet's not, I don't think he's looking at bringing it down. The Bloc, those are the only 2 that can really do it. And I don't see any kind of an indication that there's any movement on that. None. Not that I've seen. And I'd be glad to be wrong, but this looks like we're just going to carry on as usual here. So anyway, back to this. What to make of it, says Matt Gurney. We've been reminded, as if we'd forgotten, that the Prime Minister has a remarkable talent for not answering questions put to him. We've also been reminded of Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre's ability to ask the same question over and over clearly, with no expectation of actually getting an answer. It has been confirmed for those who may have harbored any lingering doubt that Liberal MPs are happy to ask their wounded Prime Minister hard-hitting questions that essentially boil down to, Mr. Prime Minister, sir, could you explain to Canadians precisely how well-meaning and awesome you are? He could, it turns out, and sources close to the PM confirm it's very well-meaning and awfully awesome. Right? So did we learn anything new? Possibly we did. Surprisingly, though, observers could be forgiven for already having carefully shunted all memories of the event into the deepest, darkest depths of their memory, where it will remain unacknowledged for decades, blah, 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 blah. The Prime Minister, in laying out the timeline of events for the first time, introduced the notion that he'd offered some pushback to the suggestion by the public service. He's unwavering that it was their idea that we oversee the grant program. Trudeau took pains to note that he was certainly aware that his family had ties to We and that his spouse was currently volunteering with them. There was an obvious risk of a perceived conflict, he said, and it was something that they took seriously. How the PM squares this clear, apparently widely shared appreciation of the need to tread carefully with his admitted failure to recuse himself from the vote is unclear. Indeed, the more the PM said of his prior understanding of the obvious conflict, the more bonkers his failure to recuse becomes. It's like a bomb squad technician meticulously effortlessly defusing the warhead, and, in the moment of triumph, lighting up a celebratory cigar and tossing the lit match onto the explosive. Whoopsie, kaboom. The eventual screw-up is worse for the previous diligence, not better, right? Like, oh man, you were so close. Still, it's not clear that the testimony accomplished much. Those who wished to see in the PM a man who only wanted what was best but screwed it up in an innocent mistake will have seen that. Those who wished to see in the PM a walking, talking ethics failure who got caught helping out celebrities who were paying off his mom will have seen that. It's hard to imagine any undecided voters sitting through the full hour plus of testimony, and even harder to imagine that any made-up minds were changed. Trudeau is Trudeau. He is what he is. This latest scandal is remarkable mainly for what it says about his inability to learn lessons and avoid self-inflicted injury, more so than it is about the substance of the issues at hand. In a weird way, perhaps that means this was a good day for the Prime Minister. He sat through the testimony and can probably realistically tell himself that he came out no better, but also no worse. It's possible that the testimony of his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, will prove more important, but if not, the PM avoided the worst-case scenario. Which isn't to say he hasn't been hurt. He has. After holding a massive 20-point lead over the Conservatives for months, polls show that the Liberals are way down. Over the past few weeks, while We has been in the news, those leads first shrank and then disappeared. The latest poll for Abacus shows the Liberals with a 4-point lead over the leaderless Tories. In Ontario, where the Liberals massacred the Conservatives last fall by a full 8 points, the Liberal lead is now 1 point. That's a swing of a dozen seats. So yes, clearly the scandal is hurting Trudeau, perhaps by forcing Canadians to remember the kind of Prime Minister he's always been. It's interesting because, it's the way the polls look, and I haven't been looking at the Abacus data or the Ipsos data or any of the polls recently, because they were all showing, and I believe that there's a crisis bump. Doug Ford is enjoying being having a popularity wave, despite making some really, really weird choices, and I'm very off-put by the things that he's doing and saying recently. And Trudeau's got that popularity wave because he's spending. Again, riding that good-intentioned, aw shucks, we've got this emergency and we're doing our best and mistakes are made and blah, blah, blah. So he's got that popularity wave, but this seems to have erased that. And the leaderless Tories, Peter MacKay, and if you've been watching the official Twitter and all of the official channels, he's poised to do well in the leadership contest that finishes August 21st. But man, I don't think that there's any, O'Toole or MacKay. I don't think there's much of a shot for Lewis or Sloan. And people think that I'm talking poorly of Lewis or Sloan. I'm not. I think they're both good candidates, but I don't think that they're playing the same game that MacKay and O'Toole are playing. MacKay and O'Toole have the CPC machine behind at least one of them, and they're willing to play ball with the party. And I think Lewis and Sloan represent a turn to the right for the party, and I don't think that the CPC wants that. And I think that the CPC will do what the CPC does. The leadership race and all of that other stuff is, wow, I mean, the last leadership race had questions of legitimacy, right? So, goodness me. I don't know. Here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says, Finance Committee. So I don't know how strong the opposition's going to be, to finish my point. I don't know how strong the opposition's going to be when the leader's picked, because I don't think MacKay's meaningfully better than Scheer. In fact, I think Scheer's probably better. And O'Toole might be a little bit better than MacKay, but I don't know that he's got a chance. So, and I don't know that it matters, because I think that the party is determined to be that center, and I can barely say right party, right? The center-ish party. Center-ish conservative party, conservative by name party. All right, back to the We scandal and Trudeau. Finance Committee adopts motion to reveal the names, dates, and contents of communication between the PMO staff and We. Liberals vote no. But yes, the Finance Committee did adopt it. I think it was 6-4. And so that means that we're going to have more testimony from the staff who made the recommendation. That should be interesting. That should give us some more information. But again, I think that they're going to be, well, I think if they're not prepped, if you don't think they're being prepped by people for this, then you'd be mistaken. I don't think that they're just going to let them go in there and say whatever. So they're going to know, and the Prime Minister's going to want to know what they're going to say too, because you got to manage this crisis, because it is a crisis. When you drop that much in your lead, it doesn't matter that you're still in the lead. When you drop that much in the lead, that's a problem. Here's the CP24 article talking about how the fallout is expected to continue, and more info, more witnesses. So that's interesting. Hold on a second here. I'm talking a lot. I'm talking a lot, so the tabs are going to sleep. I've got lots going on the computer. Anyway, here is a meme, and I thought, are they still really repaying the $30 million that was paid to We back in May? Like they haven't repaid that yet? I thought the whole thing was canceled. Usually, you send the money back. Here's here's an article from Global News, and it says, and I'm just showing that, yeah, they haven't paid it back yet. This payment was made by the government to We on June 30th and has not been drawn upon, and funds will be repaid by We in full. The notations made by We charity official state. The details of repayment are presently being worked out with the government. The notations made by We charity official state that while the organization has incurred expenses since signing the agreement that it is eligible to claim federal reimbursement for under the terms of the agreement termination clause, it will not do so. We has a right on the termination without cause to claim reimbursement for all eligible expenditures incurred up to the date of termination, the notation said. Notwithstanding this right, We is advised of its intention to waive reimbursement of its eligible expenditures to date. Wasn't it We who said, yeah, we're not going to deliver this program? So, you can agree to something and then charge people up to the time where you quit? If you quit because you can't deliver the program that only you could deliver? That's weird, isn't it? We could claim expenses, guys. Yeah, but you quit mutually, right? It was a mutually agreed upon, you guys walked away from it, right? Or is that not how it happened? Because you want to look good in the news. Here is the Ontario release plan for safe reopening of schools. The most important aspect, in my opinion, is grade 4 and up have mandatory masks. Now, I don't know if mandatory masks means mandatory masks in classroom, in their cohort in classroom. I don't think that you should be having mandatory masks all day. That would be very, very difficult to deal with. But under grade 4, no masks. I don't think this is based. There's no sunset on this. I've talked about this before. It frustrates me that there is absolutely no sunset, no any kind of limit on this masking thing, and it is absolutely appalling that our municipal governments have pushed this through without any kind of renewal clause or mandatory sunset clause. Our emergency laws have these things for a reason. This should apply, and I don't know why it doesn't. Here is the Minister of Health, but that doesn't look like Miss Elliott, so I'm not sure which minister this is. But she's saying that, well, here she's talking about COVID testing and mandatory testing, and here we go.
And in fact, if you're testing in a population that doesn't have very much COVID, you'll get false positives almost half the time. That is, the person actually doesn't have COVID, they have something else, they may have nothing. So it will just complicate the picture.
False positives? Half the time? That's not good, right? If you've got false positives 50% of the time, does your test work? We shut our economy down for this. What in the world is going on? Why are people not more upset? I don't understand. People are just sitting around saying, oh, but the COVID. I heard a parent yesterday, no, maybe the other day. We were out at the park, and just a local park, not the one close to my house. And I heard a parent yelling at his kid because his hands were too close to his mouth. He said, you're going to get the COVID. You're going to get the COVID. Get your hands away from your mouth. And I thought, man, you're doing more damage than COVID is ever going to do to that kid. That child is going to not be healthy with regards to their outlook on germs and the greater world around them. And that is a darn shame, because I don't think it's an isolated incident. And finding out all of this stuff, having Toronto Public Health talk about how somebody who dies of a car accident but has COVID, that's a COVID death, hearing 50% of tests are false positives. 50% of tests are false positives? Are you kidding me? It is very concerning with regards to seeing the HCQ doctors being pulled off of all of the video sites around the internet, YouTube and everywhere but BitChute. And I mean, goodness, thank goodness for BitChute. But there's so many pieces of the puzzle that it's hard to believe the official line. It's hard to believe the that COVID is anything other than a political stunt at this point in time, right? Like, it's what data? What hard data? What's the isolation of COVID, of the virus? There's so many questions. And no good answers. And when you ask a good question and you get a BS answer, man, that's happening more and more in our politics and in our world, and it's not acceptable. And people need to stand up and say this is not acceptable, because otherwise they'll get away with it. They are getting away with it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.